What does it mean to be a god? Right, to surpass this mortal coil and become something so much more. This being like a well of power, an icon, and a true deity. You see, that's a question that's stuck with me since the beginning of the Age of Sigmar, right? In a universe of immensely powerful beings and monsters that defy scale and magnitude, what does it mean to be one of the pantheon, right? To one of the masters guiding the fate of the mortal realms? Well, this week we are going to seek to answer that and more as we explore the tragic, dramatic, and setting-changing story that is Broken Realms Morathi. One of the things, and this is sort of an odd way to start, but I really appreciate about this book is that it has a fantastic summary of the events that have transpired before this book right at the beginning. And the last real narrative beat we had for Age of Sigmar was the book Wrath of the Everchosen. It's a campaign that saw Catacross, Mortarch of the Necropolis, make a bold move to push back against the seemingly endless forces of chaos and march upon the 8 Points, which is Archaon the Everchosen's home base. And while Catacross was eventually struck down by Archaon, he survived and braced firmly for a real retaliation, right? After all, the forces under Nagash now had a solid foothold in the Everchosen's homeland, but the thing is, no assault ever came. Archaon never appeared. No armies marched on the undead gateway to Shyish. Little did we, and of course Catacross, know that much larger machinations were afoot, that the drama of the mortal realms and the clashing nature of the various gods had reached a true fever pitch. And his epic story of taking the Allgate, that leads to Shyish, was ultimately just a footnote in the larger story going on around him. But the realms were still shaking from the Necroquake, that massive spell that Nagash unleashed upon the realms, where a tidal wave of death magic and reality-shattering power was dropped on the setting, and nothing would ever be the same. And so, in this video, we're going to set the scene for the incredible tales to come, and it's all going to start with one character, Morathi. Skilled in the arts of magic, particularly these deceptive shadow magics, and a highly skilled orator, Morathi is not a god, yet still a being of immense power and presence. Her singular goal in life is to attain that godhood that lies just outside of her reach, because the other elven gods look at her as a lesser creature. When I say the elven gods, I mean Teclis, Tyrion, and her son Malerion. And this kind of, second-tier status in terms of being a hero simply will not do for the ambitious and power-hungry nature of the High Priestess of Cain. Now, if you've been following the larger story of AOS for some time, you know there's a bit of a secret between the elven gods and Morathi. They set a trap and imprisoned the chaos god of excess, Slaanesh, in an attempt to pull souls from the elves from the old world out of him. Right, the idea was fairly simple. Teclis and Malerion would combine their arcane might of light and shadow and create an immense prison. Tyrion lures Slaanesh in, and Morathi's role in this was to show them exactly how to extract souls from the god based on how she herself escaped his maw. Reluctantly, there was decided to be an equal cut of souls for each participant, meaning they would each take their own in turn, and they could shape and mold them and recreate whatever elven race they want. Though slowly and stealthily, Morathi smuggled away more than her fair lot, and this imbalance was taxing upon the prison that held the Chaos God, and soon cracks began to show. One by one, Slaanesh began to crack and snap the magical chains that bound him, being quick to cover these weak points up with deceptive magics. And that's all that we had on Slaanesh for some time. He's in prison, slowly plotting an escape, calling out to Slaanesh demons and mortals and pulling them ever so slowly towards Ulgu and Hysh, those are the realms of light and shadow, where his prison lies right in between them. And while all that is a very important aspect to this story, our tale really begins with the ambitions of Morathi and her eternal quest for godhood. She has been seeking out any powerful artifacts, dark magics, and materials to enhance her already considerable power, and it wasn't until her spies in the 8 Points, again the home base of Archaon the Everchosen, sort of the main hub for chaos in the realms, her spies there discovered the Realm Stone of that place, and a true opportunity presented itself. Varanite, like I said, Realm Stone of the 8 Points, has the consistency of boiling gore is how it's described, but trained craftsmen can mold and sculpt this Realm Stone into powerful weapons and artifacts. It's the stuff of pure chaos given physical form, mutating and warping anything it touches. And on the whole, the material hasn't been super prevalent in the lore because if nothing else, it's extremely rare. It only shows up in this tiny, and I say tiny by comparison, pocket realm that is the 8 Points. All the other realms are significantly larger, and even within the 8 Points, it's incredibly hard to find and mine. So even, though major factions may know of its existence, it's just really hard to get. And that all changed with the discovery of Varanthax's Maw, a colossal underground tunnel network that runs far and wide across the 8 Points. It was discovered that in this place, rich veins of Varanite flow freely. And for those who know even a fraction of what this Realm Stone is capable of, it was an absolute gold mine. And I'm going to do a lore video dedicated to this location because it does require a little bit more, there's a lot more going on with there because it's also the setting for Warcry Catacombs, but this is the important parts for our story. Because this narrative opens up with two competing forces looking for this material. Archaon the Everchosen wants it in spades. His plan is a cunning one. You see, the 8 Points should have a gate to each and every realm, but during the Age of Chaos, Sigmar locked the gate to Azir, and Archaon has been trying to break open this gate ever since. Well, Varanite presents a very unique opportunity for him. Rather than smashing through the door that was locked by a god, he has no chance of doing that, the plan was to douse it in Varanite and let the truly corrupting power of chaos warp the lock itself. It's almost like if you wanted to break into a home, rather than, picking the lock, you just take a blowtorch and you literally melt it. That's kind of the idea here. Either way, you'll get in, but one is much more suited to Archaon's means. But the other angle, the other force involved, is Morathi herself, who has these shadowy spies that have relayed the power and potency of Varanite to their high priestess. Seeing this material as a means to attain more power, Morathi has become zealous to obtain large quantities of the Realm Stone, and so rather than straight up walking into the 8 Points like Catacross did, Morathi plays to her strengths, which are deception, coercion, and lies. And she goes to the god king Sigmar, who is of course dubious of her, but she explains what her spies have seen. That Archaon the Everchosen is on the brink of breaking the gate into Azir, which would only spell disaster for the up till then safe citizens of the Realm of Heavens. Now, as I explain the nature of this plan to starve Archaon, understand something very clear, and this is made extremely clear throughout the book. At no point does Sigmar really trust Morathi, right? He knows the games and the deceit, and he's certainly been warned by Teclis and Tyrion, if nothing else. But this is a situation where the stakes are so high, no one has the luxury to say, nah, I'll figure it out, I don't want your help, right? Because if this is allowed to happen and Archaon marches on Azir, Sigmar's whole plan falls apart. No more Stormcast Eternal reinforcements going to the realms. The constant tide of undead from Shyish, which is still happening in the background, cannot be resisted, and all the other Order factions that have relied upon Sigmar in some fashion, whether through directly fighting along Stormcast or having, safe, secure residence like Cities of Sigmar, will suffer greatly and die a slow death. This is not the time to be picky for allies, is what I mean. But nonetheless, with her skill in diplomacy and statesmanship, Morathi pitches to Sigmar a plan. Listen, we don't need to actually, invade and take the 8 Points for real. That would take way too many resources and lives. Instead, we create two armies. One main force comes at Varanthax's Maw from the nearby mountains to bombard it, kind of pulling away the defenders. And the second force, led by Morathi herself, would sneak in through the passageways that her spies had found and eliminate the impossibly large vein of Varanite. Again, we don't need to defeat Archaon in this plan, we just need to get rid of the Varanite. You solve the problem. The idea was that Morathi would essentially open a portal to nowhere, a space between the realms, and basically the Varanite would flow freely into it, into the void, never to bother anyone again. Now, of course, as you and I hear this, you can obviously tell that Morathi has a plan, but again, the situation is so dire, how do you say no? And so Sigmar pulls together forces from various storm hosts. Honestly, all of them are represented. All the ones that are in the actual book, and then a few others are name dropped, they're all in this story in some capacity. So it truly is pulling the auxiliaries of everything. And Morathi assembles the best troops from her favored temples, and they kind of put together this amalgamation of a Stormcast and Daughters of Cain army. Now at this point, the story does a kind of a little bit of a cutscene, if you will, right? So put a pin in that. That's where we're at in terms of they have a plan. We're not going to fight Archaon. We're just going to shut down the Varanite mine. That's the only thing that's important. And we're going to just put a pin in that and come right back to it. Because the story switches to the next of Morathi's machinations. So again, pause right there. But she needs to assemble the right tools for her job and able to enact this. So we're going to, like I said, take a step away. If you're not familiar with the Idnith Deepkin and how they fit into this story, these are the firstborn elves taken from the mouth of Slaanesh. To aid in their recovery, Teclis created an artifact called the Acarian Lantern. It's essentially a light that emits the pure radiance of Hysh, and it attracts souls to it. It draws souls in. Well, if you want the full story on the creation of the Deepkin, I really do suggest checking out my series on them, but to put it briefly, Teclis looked upon this, first draft, if you will, of elves, so to speak, and found them wanting. They were too damaged, too scarred from their time in Slaanesh, and so he sought to destroy them, and basically just start all over again. So sensing this, the Cathai, who are like the forebearers of the modern Deepkin, ran away from their creator, and they stole the lantern here as well, just so that Teclis could not use it on them to draw them back, which was a smart move. They fled to the deepest depths of the ocean and hid it there in Gairan, where the darkness was able to cover it, secure it, crushing depths, all that stuff. It's a very well hidden thing. Well, using a system of spies, assassins, and reporters, Morathi was able to retrieve the lantern at significant cost. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I've way super simplified that story just for the sake of brevity, but the story is a cool one, and like all my lore videos, I leave details out so that you can grab the book and read it for yourself, because I do highly recommend it. So think of that snippet, right? She's getting tools in the background. We know she has things going on. Like I said, it's like a cutscene from the main story. And I think that's a significant part of this book, is a lot of it's dedicated to, you have the main story arc of, okay, Morathi wants Varanite, and everything else surrounding that is a scheme to be able to get it, right, at the least amount of cost to her. And so the only thing left to figure out at this point was, how do we actually get into the 8 points, right? At the conclusion of the Realm Gate Wars, many of the gates leading to and from the 8 points were closed or otherwise left in ruin, right? They're unattainable, like the one in Gur. It's a mobile one, they can't quite catch it. Also keep in mind that any fortresses held by chaos were simply out of the question, since the defenses would be so deeply entrenched. So there was, just by, process of elimination, one gate that held an ounce of opportunity. This was, of course, the Genesis Gate. This is a massive doorway. It's kind of built into a waterfall leading from Ghyran, the Realm of Life, to the 8 points. And if you don't know, the Realm Gate Wars ended with a combined offensive of Stormcast, Eternals, and Sylvaneth, led by Alariel, were able to take and hold it. They struck down the Glotkin. It was a really awesome story arc there. And, of course, Alariel is extremely reluctant to allow Morathi and Sigmar passage, because the gate took so much to close, and it opens up right in the heart of her kingdom, right? And so it's, why would I undo the things that we took so much time fighting for? Why would I open this can of worms into the heart of my kingdom? Eventually, though, Morathi's smooth words eventually brought Alariel on board, because, again, can't stress enough, if Azir falls, it's like a domino effect, and now all the other forces of order are now on their own, divided, and it's just going to collapse like a house of cards. So there is some real reason why she would, kind of acquiesce here. But one thing to keep in mind as we're going to go into the story throughout the rest of the week is that the Genesis Gate is the easiest doorway into the 8 points. It is not the closest gateway to their destination. So there's going to be a lot of travel time in this story, and the story goes through it really briefly, and I'm going to do it as well. So like it's not like wasting a bunch of time with them just walking across a field or anything like that. But what I mean is that the distance is so great that just sheer battle attrition will be a huge issue for any army going into the 8 points. And so with this plan established, we have, we'll go through our checklist here, right? We have a clear and present threat, meaning Archaon getting into the gates of Azir. Dire consequences, because if Azir falls, everything else is ruined. They have a plan to stop it by cutting off the Varanite supply, and a way to get there through the Genesis Gate. And that's actually where I'm going to end today's video, but I wanted to add a few thoughts on why I think this is so cool. You see, it clearly shows Morathi's ability to smooth talk. Statesmanship and diplomacy are not often highlighted skills in Warhammer books. Of course, it's called Warhammer, not Talkhammer, but it's a supremely powerful ability to be able to corral forces, to manipulate these things, and I just really appreciate it because throughout, as I'm reading these opening chapters of this book, you get to see the idea that, like, okay, Morathi is like a real schemer. Right, I mean, she's actually really, really good at this. The book illustrates that she has, very real reasons of why this pantheon should join her, why Sigmar would want to join her, why Alariel would open the door. They're all reasonable, as far as motivations for assisting Morathi, but again and again, it's reinforced that she has all these ulterior motives. Nobody trusts her for great reason, but the stakes are so high, you don't really have a choice. Another thing I want to point out is that it pulls on so many narrative threads that were laid down in the past. Who has which realm gate to enter matters because that's how the Realm Gate Wars concluded. Varanite as a realm stone, and how Varanthax's maw is tied into this, is the core idea of Warcry Catacombs. Morathi's goal of godhood and how her dealings with Slaanesh and the other elven gods played a part in that from her battle tome. Like, all these, again, narrative threads are being pulled and woven together in very interesting ways. And I love when, Black Library authors and writers do that kind of thing, because it makes me feel like, oh, that was the Realm Gate Wars. We don't talk about that anymore. It's done. It's kind of like a historical event that has no more significance. But when we talk about like why these forces are where they are and what entryways they have to take and how these alliances are panning out, all of those things matter significantly, and many more will matter soon. So I love that kind of stuff, and what's great about it is you don't have to have read everything to get it, right? The motivations are pretty clear enough that it's obvious for someone who's just jumping into AOS right now, but it's very rewarding if you have, and to me that's kind of the sweet spot when it comes to historical events, kind of a nod to things in the past, but not relying on you having to read them. I will say, if you are new to AOS, I do have lore videos for dedicated lore weeks for each of the factions involved. Daughters of Cain, Cities of Sigmar, Stormcast Eternals, all of them. So if you're interested in more, or the Realm Gate Wars, go ahead and check out those playlists here on my channel. I would really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. We're taking the rest of this week to talk about Broken Realms Morathi, and I do hope that you'll join me. And if you know somebody who'd be interested in it, go ahead and share this video. It would mean the absolute world to me. So thank you all so much for watching and listening. Happy wargaming. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was made possible by the folks over here to the left. These are my top supporters over here on YouTube and on Patreon that keep this channel going. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a supporter and get some cool things in the process, like exclusive pictures and interactions with me, and get your questions answered here on the channel, go ahead and click any of the links down below or the join button on the community page over on YouTube. Regardless of your choice, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me with this video, and I look forward to seeing you in my next one. Happy wargaming.